A little.
Hi.
We'll start off. I just want to say you look very dashing and handsome today.
Oh, thank
nice.
you, thank
April
you.
Fools. And let's get this thing rolling. All right.
Jed, what role did you play in the cost-cutting measures, or at least the cash cutback this offseason?
I think my uncle played more of a measure by instituting the salary cap from his spending. It's just a math thing, right? Like when you sit down with your guys and figure out where do you want to go, what do you want to build, and you make the decision that you want to pay a quarterback that has obviously been underpaid for his first 3 seasons in the NFL. When you make that change, you have to make sacrifices somewhere. It's a decision that we made collectively, and we're hoping that we make somebody the highest paid player in the history of our franchise, and that was a decision that we made, I mean, probably in the middle of the season.
Where are you guys in the negotiation process with Brock Purdy's representation?
I mean, that's JL and P and those guys. I mean, I think we've had good discussions. I've seen Brock a few times just at the gym and at the facility. So it's like, that's just not something I'm going to get deep into, but I have every hope and every expectation that Brock is going to be a 49er for a long, long time.
Jed, there have been reports that you're looking to sell a piece of the team. Is that accurate, and if so, why?
I mean, we get approached probably on a weekly basis of somebody that's interested, and it's, you know, it's just one of those things where if there's an opportunity that makes sense, we would always explore that, but I'm not sure what we're going to end up doing. And if we do, we would try to find the right people that would help bolster everything that we're doing in and around the team, on the field, off the field, and just make sure that we had good partners that were with us.
So related to some of the, people that are now able to buy into teams that maybe you would get a valuation that would be just too hard to say no to, kind of thing?
No, I mean, it's more of a family conversation of, my family owns 97% of the 49ers, and it's a big asset. And you have different family members, right, that have different things that they want to do in the team, around the team, outside of the team. And it's a family asset allocation decision.
And as far as your involvement now in soccer and Rangers, where does that stand, and does that have any impact on the San Francisco 49ers?
Well, we haven't done anything there. Leeds is obviously under the umbrella, but I mean, those are completely separate from the 49ers, where we can tie brands together and sort of take our best practices of operating and things like that. But in terms of financials, like they don't overlap at all.
Do you see all the cost cutting that has been happening kind of similar to what you've seen from other teams in the past, like the Bucks or maybe the Rams when they've gone through it before? Is it similar to that?
Well, I mean, they weren't trying to pay a quarterback, right? So, I mean, like you say, cost cutting, like just because we didn't spend money in the first 3 days of free agency doesn't mean that we're prohibited from making trades, signing players, extending our own players, and that's always something that we're trying to do. So it's really, how do you continue to build with the core that you have, and how do you make sure that you continue to extend that core into the future where you don't have to take a huge step backwards to take a few steps forward.
And John yesterday said he was embarrassed about the 6-11 record. Doesn't want to ever go there again. Do you have the same emotions?
I mean, I've said this before, like if you're not going to do well, like I want to not do very well, right? Like I was talking to, I can't remember who it was a top 4 or 5 pick last night, one of the coaches, and like, it's awful to be here, but then when you're in the draft and you get a chance to see these players, like, you don't ever want to put yourself here, but you get an opportunity. And that's the biggest difference to me with the 49ers and Leeds, right? If we don't play well, I think we were a better football team than 6-11, but that's, as Bill Parcells says, you are what your record says you are. We're drafted 11th. We're going to have the opportunity to add some really, really good football players. And whether that's at 11, moving up, moving back, and all the way throughout the draft, but that's not where you want to consistently be. And we have to take advantage of having a higher draft pick than what we've had for a long time, and just continue to make this team younger, stronger, better, so we can continue to compete for what we ultimately want to do.
Jed, some of the, you could say like the Hargrave contract wasn't great. Maybe, I don't know, IU contract, or wait and see. But I mean, some of these contracts haven't been maybe awesome. I mean, is anything like, I guess this offseason, is anything tied to like a dissatisfaction from you
No,
about the
I
way
mean, it's-
money is being spent?
I mean, from an asset allocation standpoint, it's the portfolio and how the portfolio performs, right? Like you can't look and say, well, you know, we traded 3 first-round picks for Trey, and like we made a huge mistake. Well, we found another quarterback. Like the thinking was correct, right? Like you wanted a young quarterback with the core group of people that we had, so you can continue to add around it. But ultimately, you need to find that quarterback that can be there for a long period of time. Like, I mean, most of you guys have covered the team for a long time. Like the Mike Nolan, Mike Singletary teams, those defenses were unbelievable defenses. But when you can't put everything together on the offensive side of the ball, like we did when Jim came in, it doesn't really matter. Like it doesn't matter if you don't have consistent play at the quarterback position. And when you find somebody that is a top 10 quarterback that can help you continually win football games, you have to make that decision. And if you do that, it just comes with consequences, and you have to figure out. I think I don't know if we were the oldest team in the league last year, but we were one of the oldest teams in the league. We were, depending on what measure you look at, one of the most injured teams last year. You have to get younger and healthier, and you have to make sure you build around a core, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, are you saying that Brock Purdy's a top 10 quarterback?
I think he is. I think he's great. And especially when you combine him with Kyle, and you combine him with what we have, he's a heck of a quarterback, and you want him to be here for a long, long time.
John, you know, when he's talked this offseason, he's talked about cash spending, which obviously is different from cap. And, you know, that goes to money you're paying out, you know, up front. I mean, people will, you know, make that distinction and say, you know, you're being cheap. You know, you should be.
I've been called worse.
I guess I know you've kind of answered.
I think you
this.
guys have called me worse. At least a couple of you.
But how do you respond to that? Who people say, well, hey, you know.
Look, I get it. Like fans care, right? Like you want to win, and when you're in a world where everybody is watching the NFL the first week of free agency, or at least the first 3 days of free agency, it's a frenzy, right? Like you see a huge spike in social following and things like that because it's something to get engaged in. And when you're not overly active in that space, like it's easy to say, you know, you don't want to win. Like I think we have, you know, a handful of Pro Bowlers and potentially even better players on our roster still. Like we still have a pretty good roster. And you don't just have to do things the first 3 days in free agency, right? Like you look at this Philadelphia Eagles last year. You go out and get a guy like Saquon Barkley, who's a future Hall of Famer, great player. Like that's somebody that made a huge impact. I don't know that as we look at draft picks and having higher draft picks, we have the ability to continue to supplement our team by having somebody at the most important position there for a long time.
When you talk about the portfolio performing, the entire 53-man roster, we could talk about the core, but how important is it to have kind of the meat of the roster beyond that, spots 10 to 53, be really augmented with youth and...
I mean, it depends on where you are, right? And when you were one of the oldest teams in the league last year, and you were one of the most injured teams in the league last year, you just have to be honest with where you are, and you have to figure out how do we regenerate the team, but not take a huge step backwards. And I think we have a great core of people, right? We have, I think, the best GM coach combination in the National Football League. They're two guys that I would rather work with than anybody else in the world. And then you have a lot of great players that care about this franchise, right? If Christian is continuing to work the way he does, and he's a guy that's healthy this season, unlike last year, I feel like we have a really, really good chance to compete, right? Like there are certain players like that, but you need to make sure that you fill out those other spots with people that can come in and play. And, you know, again, like teams go through different life cycles, and you're in a life cycle now of still having a really good core of people, but some of those tangential pieces you have to address through the draft or through free agency at a lower expectation or a lower level so you can pay your quarterback. And that's just where we are.
It seemed like a few years ago when you had a big deal that you were negotiating, it got done on the eve of training camp. And then it happened a couple of days into training camp. And now these deals are happening at the end of training camp. Have you Has that been problematic for you, and have you changed your
No.
negotiating process this go around so that doesn't happen?
I mean, again, like, you can't make somebody sign a deal, right? Like, whoever it is, like, in general or specifically, right? You have to make sure that you figure out the right way to do it. And whenever somebody wants to sign a deal that we've offered a contract to, like, we want to make sure that we close that. I can't tell you when they're going to sign or how they're going to sign. Like, I mean, that's out of my control, and it's not something that you can worry about, right? Like, I have no power over somebody else to make them sign a contract today. They have to sign when they're ready, and we have to be patient and prepared and make sure that we do the right thing for the club.
How do you feel any talks with Brock have gone to this point? Productive?
I mean, I don't negotiate contracts, but any conversations that I've had with Brock personally have been great, you know, so I feel good, and when he's ready, like, we'll sit down and finish it. Like, it shouldn't be that hard to do.
That's it? All right, awesome.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Jed.
Jed.